Well, earlier I spoke to economist and syndicated columnist Taha Meli Arvas, who's based in Istanbul. And I started off by asking him how countries in the region are viewing the turmoil in Turkey.
I think citizens on the street are very apprehensive about what's going on. I think they see a lot of headlines about what's going on in Turkey as well as around the world. So they're trying to look for to see where the economy will be headed in the future. It's a guessing game now for a lot of people, just because not only is there trouble in Turkey as far as the economy goes, but globally there's been a lot of issues, and so that makes people very apprehensive about right now.
And added to that, we see that confidence in Turkey's economy is now at a 9-year low. So which emerging markets are most exposed to what's happening in Turkey, and how might we see that impact played out?
Well, like you said, emerging markets in general are suffering right now across the board. So not only, I mean, Turkey has had the most trouble in the last few weeks, but across the board, I mean, India, their currency is at multi-year lows. South African rand is down. Argentina is doing much worse than Turkey is, obviously. But the most important thing that the Europeans will be watching is contagion in Europe. So many countries in Europe are very heavily invested in Turkey. So that means, you know, countries like Bulgaria, Hungary, Spain, Italy, etc., are very heavily invested. And they themselves, these countries that I've mentioned, are experiencing their own turmoil. Italy for example, today has the largest spread between the Italian government bonds and the German bonds. So it means investors are very weary of investing in Italy, etc.
So as we look at contagion issues, at what point do you think the international community would or should get involved?
Well, I think sooner than later. I mean, you remember the Greek financial crisis, and the Greek crisis, Greece was too big to fail, and Turkey is 5 times larger than Greece as far as the economy goes. So that's an indication of how serious and how quick the international community should be responding here, because the Greek crisis, it froze global markets for almost 2 years, and just today Greece's growth rate has decreased by 80% year on year. So, I mean, the Greek economy, despite coming out of the IMF package recently, has stalled. So I think steps need to be taken as soon as possible here.
So let's look at those steps. What sort of international intervention perhaps would work in this situation?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing would be the ECB injecting money into Turkish government bonds, into supporting the Turkish banks, which are owned by Europeans. So, I mean, it wouldn't be a bailout for Turkey here. It would be bailing out the Europeans themselves, because the largest banks in Turkey are owned by countries like Spain and Italy. So, you take these steps now to save these. I mean, not that the banks are in a risk of default or anything, but they'll be hit on. They're facing a lot of external debt issues now, and the ECB could very easily shore up these banks and shore up the economy here. And it would only be saving itself from further costs that its member countries would be facing should these banks have difficulties in the future. So the ECB needs to step in here, I think, and it would be very easy and very, frankly, inexpensive for them to take steps now.
Despite what's happening, President Erdogan says that the country's economic infrastructure is strong enough to withstand the current turmoil, and that's including the tariffs on metals from the US, as well as the sanctions that were put on them. Do you agree? Does Turkey have the right economic infrastructure to handle this?
I mean, I think there's 2 issues there. I mean, the first, the tariffs on Turkish metals being exported to the United States. These are very, very small tariffs. These make up less than 10% of the total trade between the United States and Turkey. It's more of a cautionary step. I think it's more of a kind of a warning shot to Turkey. But we need to realize here that there are elections coming up in the United States in November. And so the Trump administration needs to be doing whatever it can to help its party be successful in the elections. But as to what the president said, I mean, Turkey has very strong demographics. It has a growing population. It has a lot of investment in infrastructure. And the financial system, I think, is able to withstand this financial crisis. But the question is, do you want it to come out of the crisis very quickly, or do you want it to spread and be another great recession globally?